Hi, hello. My name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. Today I've got a finished object to chat about, as well as a continued whip, a new whip, something sort of in the middle. I also have some fun acquisitions to talk about, including some from a trip that I just got home from, so we'll get more into that in a sec. And then some Off the Needles content at the end with a bit of a book update and some other stuff to chat about. Before I get into all that though, today I'm drinking out of a brand new mug, which is related to the trip that I just mentioned. So I just got back home from an amazing trip to Peru, so I appropriately got an amazing alpaca mug. Look how cute he is. He also has these flowers around him that you kind of see everywhere around in Peru. I was in Lima for a few days and then in Cusco, which is where I picked up this mug in a cute little boutique called Atypica Concept Store, I think. It's by Zabe Ceramics and it's super adorable. And in it today, I'm drinking my usual Sloan Classic Earl Grey, which I missed a lot the last little bit because there's not a lot of Earl Grey to be found in Peru. There is, however, coca leaf tea, which is a lifesaver when the altitude sickness is killing you. I waited too last minute to make this tea. This is way too hot. I'm gonna put this down. Anyway, so I had a couple friends who were getting married in Peru. The bride is Peruvian. That's where all her family is. So it made perfect sense to have the wedding there. And did I buy yarn in the place that is home to 80% of the alpacas in the entire world? Yeah. Of course I did. So stay tuned for acquisitions. Now, as for what I'm wearing today, we can just jump right into finished objects because ta-da, my Lyon sweater is complete. So this is a pattern by Petite Knit. This pattern accommodates up to a 59-inch bust. I was knitting size 2 and this pattern runs 50 Danish kroner, which cost me about $10 in Canadian. I knit this out of Knitting for Olive merino with 7 balls of the color blood orange and 4 balls of the color poppy rose. I ordered this from La Maison Tricotée in Quebec and it cost me $180.24 Canadian minus I had $100 in gift cards. So it actually cost me $80, which brings my total project cost of pattern and yarn to about $90 Canadian or about $64 US. As usual, I was disregarding the needle size written in the pattern. I always need to size up, so this was knit on 4.5mm needles instead of the 4mm recommended in the pattern. And the sweater is knit top down in the round in sort of a seamless construction where you start with the back panel, you pick up to do the 2 little fronts at the sides, and then you join in the round at the underarm. So I cast this on January 1st and I finished it either February 15th or 16th. Like it took me basically exactly a month and a half. And honestly, it might have run me a few days later if I were operating on sort of a normal timeline, but I was leaving for Peru on February 17th and I really wanted to bring this with me. I was like, I think that this DK Way of sweater of non-superwash merino will be really nice on this trip because Lima is super hot, like it is the dead of summer, but Cusco is not like that. It is at altitude and it is the rainy season there. Now we got absurdly lucky because it should have poured rain like all day, every day that we were there. And in fact, it almost did not rain at all. Like it was a meteorological miracle, but it wasn't warm. It was cool. It was a very sort of like peeling layers on and off throughout the day sort of place as the sun goes out or goes away. It made a huge difference. And I knew that having a nice sort of mid-weight wool sweater like this would serve me really well there. Also, like who would not want to get finished object pictures at Machu Picchu if you could? Why? So I was highly incentivized to get this done before I left, and I did manage to do that. All right, let me get up so you can see this a little better. Ta-da! All right, so this is my Lyon sweater. This is definitely my sort of roomiest, easy to like throw on, take off kind of sweater that I have knit. I think that if I have knit sweaters that were sort of the same dimensions as this one, they've been in a much sort of heavier weight, so they're still not quite as like effortless to just kind of like what is this? Move around? I don't know. The arms on this are definitely a lot roomier than the ones on my Barnsley sweater, which is one where the sleeves turned out quite tight, which is not uncomfortable once it's on. It's just more of an ordeal to take it on and off. So I really appreciate that about this one. It makes it kind of a really easy, effortless layering piece. It also looks nice, sort of like a little French tuck. It totally works. I really like it. I really love the shoulder seam construction, this nice crisp line you can see there. It's just good. I just feel like this looks like a sweater that you would just buy in a store, except that you'd be unlikely to find this color palette in the store, which is one of the things I like about knitting for myself and picking my own colors. Now I know I mentioned this last time, but I loved working on this sweater. Like watching the construction come together on this one is just so satisfying. I'd never knit a sweater before that was constructed in quite this way, so just seeing it all come together when I didn't entirely understand how it was going to come together, but coming together in a way that's so like crisp and precise and pristine was just very satisfying. And just stripes are fun. Stripes are just fun. This is my second, I think, thing that I've knit now with stripes. I did my Sailor Swift top last summer, and both times just great. Like, it's such a like simple little like lizard brain thing to find it so motivating to be like, oh my god, I just a few more rows, just a few more rows. Like, that's like objectively silly, but it's real. It's so true. So if you've never tried knitting stripes and you think that like maybe it's overhyped, I recommend trying it out because I suspect your lizard brain will really like it. And to me, this is evidenced by the fact that I knit this up as quickly as I did. Like, I don't usually plow through a sweater in a month and a half. Like, usually it would take me a bit longer than that. So I think that's just a testament to how much I enjoyed working on this. It's stockinette in the round, but again, like, the stripes keep it interesting. Because, like, as much as I say that stockinette in the round is my favorite thing to knit, I do think that truthfully, I need a little bit of something else going on in order for me to sit there and want to work on it for hours. And I think that this was like just enough interest to be like super low demand on the brain. I can 100% be doing other things, but I want to be doing this forever. So as far as process, since the last time we talked about this, last time I had mentioned that I had done a mid-project block and I was shocked by how much it grew, right? That my sleeves were super far away from being done. I blocked in suddenly. They were way closer to being done than I could have imagined. I was theorizing maybe this is because I think this is my first time knitting with the Knitting for Olive Merino, not holding a double with a mohair. So I was thinking maybe on its own this yarn is more inclined to grow, but the mohair is usually kind of like wrangling it in for me, and it's not doing that in that case because it's not here. And that might still be true to a degree, but I found that as I was continuing to knit the body, the pattern tells you want to end on your main color. So in my case, this red-orange color. You want that to be your last stripe before the ribbing starts, see? So this means that in terms of your sleeve length, you're basically operating in increments of however long 2 stripes put together is. So like a little over an inch, I think in my case. I got to the point where the body was basically where it was supposed to be before I started ribbing. It was short, I think like 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. So I was like, well, like the rest of the body really grew. So I think it's safe to assume that this bottom portion of knit is gonna grow too. It's several more inches. So there's several inches that should grow by that same rough percentage, right? I think that will give me that 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches, no problem. So I went ahead and did my ribbing. I was smart enough to not do my sewn bind off. And I blocked it. This was before my sleeves were done also. And I found that it didn't grow. In fact, my sweater was still about 1/2 inch shorter than it was supposed to be. And so granted, there was a lot less like unblocked material in this case to grow. So I was like, okay, well maybe I just overestimated like the percentage growth, and like I just hadn't added enough unblocked material to get that kind of growth out of it. So I'm now wondering if what actually happened when I got so much more length out of the body and the sleeves was maybe just the shoulder construction relaxing, right? Like maybe before blocking, it was kind of holding a shape that was more like strictly like this, you know? And then after blocking, maybe it's sort of like just like melts over the shoulder a little bit more. And maybe that's where most of the extra length came from, as opposed to actual growth in the length of the body fabric or the arm fabric. I don't know, but okay. It's not as long as I want it to be. And 1/2 inch doesn't sound like a lot, but I feel like there's a very fine line between a sweater that is the right length and a sweater that is just like a little weird and drafty at your back. And this was definitely at the a little bit weird and drafty point. It also, if I'm being honest, was doing more of like a mushrooming with the ribbing than I wanted it to. I had downsized my needles for the ribbing like it tells you to. I downsized more than it told you to, partly because like those were the needles that happened to be sitting nearby that were readily available, but also partly because generally just smaller needles make a neater ribbing and whatever. And I didn't really conceptualize of the degree to which it was gonna snatch in the bottom of that sweater. I did not love it. So between the length not being exactly what I wanted it to be and the ribbing realistically not being what I wanted it to be, I took a deep breath and I unraveled my ribbing and I knit another repeat of stripes, and then I redid my ribbing on larger needles. Not as large as I was knitting the whole body on, but I think just like one size down rather than like, I think maybe 3 sizes down. So we went a little more restrained the second time, and I'm much more happy with how it came out this time. Now it does more of a sort of like laying straight, which is more how it looks in like the pattern photos, and I think just works better with this style. That said though, I think that I could have knit the ribbing on the sleeves even tighter. So I finished the sleeve length after I had this whole debacle with the body. So I knew at that point, like I had a better idea of how long I should be knitting the sleeves to. Like it should basically be where I want them to end up being. I shouldn't be counting on any growth. And then I did the ribbing, and honestly the sleeve openings are like still kind of bigger than I feel like they need to be, and not in a way where I dislike the look, but just when I try to push the sleeves up, they don't always stay. Like I kind of have to like give it a double roll to get it to stay, which I just don't love because I just am a person who pushes my sleeves up a lot. I just find it a useful thing to be able to do. And again, much in the same way that like I was a bit not sold on the mushrooming as well as the length, this is twofold because I'm a bit not sold on the openness of the cuff, but also despite all of my best efforts to make sure that these sleeves were long enough and being like, is that long enough? I think it might need a little bit more. And then knitting more. And then doing the same, this might need a little bit more. Like I kept doing that and thought that I landed at a point where like, my God, this is definitely the right length, if not longer than it needs to be. Somehow now I'm at a place where like, are they long enough? Like I think that some sleeves just have a way of shrinking when you wear them. I don't know what that's about. I think that this is more in my head than it otherwise would be because on my trip I was often wearing it layered under like a puffer vest, which of course like hikes your armhole up into your armpit more and does shorten the sleeve a little. So on the trip I was doing a lot of like this to like pull my sleeve down. So I'm not sure how much of it is just in my head from that versus like the actual length of the sleeves in regular wear. But I feel like I might like them to be a little bit longer. Like I would have to do a whole stripe repeat. And I think I would be okay with them being that much longer. I think that might be better, but I'm not sure. I'm planning to live with it for a little while longer and just kind of see how I feel as time goes on. Do I get used to it? Does it bug me? Does it seem worth the hassle of going back and doing it? I think that if I do, what I actually need to do is do more decreases before I start the ribbing. The pattern does have you do some sleeve decreases, and I double checked. I was like, did I forget to do the decreases for the ribbing? But I didn't. I have the correct number of stitches. But I think that I need to take out more, like possibly a quarter to a third of them, just to get a nice cinched cuff that actually stays where I put it. I don't know, TBD if I will decide to do that, but that's the thing that's kind of floating around in my head right now. One other thing that I noted about this pattern is that so on the sleeve, you're doing decreases as you go. See if I can sort of, you see the decrease line. And I just found that because of the stripes, I think it's in the spots where I am both changing colors and decreasing at the same time. Some of those just turned out kind of messy, and I actually ended up like duplicate stitching over a couple of them that ended up being really sort of strange and loose. So I mean, that's obviously just kind of like a technique thing of mine that is not up to snuff, right? I'm not a master knitter, and so I suspect this is a thing that like with more experience I probably would not have had this issue, but it does have me thinking that maybe if I encounter this sort of thing again, I might want to mitigate that by maybe offsetting by a few stitches where the color changes versus where the decreases happen, because even after I noticed this issue and was actively trying to avoid it, it was still happening to me sometimes. So it doesn't seem like this is a thing that I, in my current state, am equipped to like circumvent just by paying close attention or like trying to do a really good job. So I think that if it comes up again, yeah, I might need to do some mitigation tactics on that. I mean, it's under the arm, like it doesn't matter, no one sees this, but just in terms of like trying to improve my craft over time, this is something that I might be thinking about. Now I feel like I just listed a bunch of things about this sweater that I don't like, which I don't like because I love this sweater. But like I don't know what to tell you positive about it other than all the rambling I already did. I love it. It's great. It's a great pattern. I feel like it's a really fun blank canvas for different interesting color combinations. I'm really happy that I decided to knit the size 2 instead of the size 1. I was sort of on the cusp debating between those two, and I really love the roomier fit that I got. Like I said, I don't really have any sweaters that I've knit that feel like this on. It just feels the most sort of like oversized cozy, and also feels very easy to integrate into my wardrobe in a way that's similar to like something I had bought in the store yesterday. I remember when I knit my Petite Knit No Frills cardigan, I was kind of like, I don't know if I really got a great sense of Petite Knit. Like there's a lot of hype around Petite Knit. Obviously Petite Knit patterns are super popular, and I was like, well, I mean, this is just like a very basic piece, so this doesn't feel like the thing to judge it off of. It's just a raglan style cardigan that you knit in flat stockinette until it hits the floor. Like it's very simple. And I feel like the construction of this one has given me a better idea of what people like about Petite Knit. The details on how to do your striping, the construction, the way that the fit comes together, it's so good. I really, really love this pattern. Like I could see using this pattern as a base if I just needed a plain sweater pattern and ignoring the stripes and just using this as like the blank canvas to do something else with, because it's just good. I really like it. Okay, time to get into the whip, aka what I brought with me to Peru, because this was done. Obviously I needed something to work on. It's like a 9-hour flight. I was not going to be knitless. So in my last video, I was talking about the trials and tribulations of my collet pullover and trying to figure out what yarn am I using for this? Because I'd bought my cotton lino, I had swatched with it, I'd even started the sweater with it, and then felt like, this is looking too open, I'm not sold on this. Is this what it's supposed to look like? Am I just thinking too critically about this? Is it going to be fine in the end? And I ultimately decided I need to go back to the drawing board and incorporate some mohair. So let's do a stats rundown. So this pattern is the Collet Pullover by Sari Nordland. This pattern accommodates up to between a 58 to a 62 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. I'm knitting size 1 and the pattern costs €6.90 in euros. Now I'm knitting this out of the Wandering Flocks cotton lino in the colorway Citrine, as well as their mohair, also in the colorway Citrine. So it's like a perfect match. And like I said, initially, I just ordered the cotton lino. So I ordered that directly from the Wandering Flock website, which cost me $134 Canadian. And then I got hit with courier fees. So it was like $55 in brokerage fees from UPS, which ew. And then when I realized I needed to add a mohair, and I ended up picking the most expensive possible mohair because it was the perfect match for it. Had I realized how expensive it was when I made that decision, maybe I would have made a slightly different decision, but here we are. That was $162.72 Canadian, and our total yarn cost is $352.24 Canadian, or about $245 US, which, like, ouch. That's not a number that I plan to do very often because, yeah, ouch. But I had a vision and I was being stubborn and I was not prepared to let go of that vision, so here we are. As usual, I've had to go up a needle size on this project, but this one more so than usual. Again, I mentioned last time, I've now heard from a lot of people that Sari Nordland's gauge seems to be kind of a mystery to anyone who is not an extremely loose knitter, because no one else seems to be able to match her gauge very easily. So I had to size up from a 3.5 millimeter needle, is what's written in the pattern, to 4.5 millimeters. Like, I had to upsize by more than 25% of the needle size. Like, an entire millimeter. That's a lot. That's a lot. This is also why I had to add mohair, because without it, it was a very open gauge. But I am pleased to report that with the addition of the mohair, I think that gauge is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that looks. So I initially cast this on December 26th, had my whole saga of things not working out. That's why I started the Lyon sweater instead on January 1st, and I recast on the collet as soon as this was done, so like February 16th or 17th, like a day before my flight, sort of just enough time to get it set up so I could work on it on the plane comfortably. And this is what we have. So, worth noting that it has been 4 weeks since I last recorded, even though it's only been 2 weeks since you will have seen my last episode, because I pre-planned things around Peru, etc., etc. So this is 4 weeks worth of knitting, including a lot of time on planes, less so on the flight there because it was an overnight, so I was also trying to get a little bit of sleep. But on the way home, literally all I did was knit for 9 hours, in which time I did basically exactly 1 cable repeat. You can see the cable repeats are quite long, so I did an entire one of those on the flight from Lima to Toronto. So the state of this right now is that, allegedly, it is time for me to start the ribbing. But as we've learned, it is often not actually time for me to start ribbing when a pattern tells me that it's time to start ribbing. But I also don't know yet because I have not yet done any sort of mid-project blocking on this. So that is going to be not the next step, but a next step, a soon step, an imminent step. But before I do that, I want to pick up and get the sleeve started, sort of just enough that I get the sleeve cap in there, and similar to my Lyon sweater, like I want to see how much that upper garment structure is going to relax so that when I'm gauging the lengths of my sleeves and my body, it's actually where it's actually going to land, which is the same reason why I've already gone in and added the neckband. So I know how that's going to sit on me too. So when I restarted this one, I chose not to swatch because, again, with the construction of this one, it's very similar to the Lyon. You start just by knitting this sort of trapezoid back panel, and I was like, it's basically a swatch. Like, it's not that much bigger than a swatch. I would rather just get started. If I get started and decide I don't like it and want to modify it, fine, I'll wish I had swatched, but I think it's more likely, like based on having done the swatch previously, it was on the cusp of being okay, right? I was very iffy about it, so I was like, with mohair, I think I'm almost definitely going to like it. I will just start. So I just started, and yeah, I am very happy with how the gauge on this one is turning out. It's definitely going to be a warmer sweater than I had initially sort of envisioned this being, right? My whole thinking in picking the cotton lino was, oh, it'll be a nice, light, like springy, layery piece. And does mohair say nice, light, spring layery? Not so much. Maybe like a really early spring, you know? But I decided that I can always knit other lightweight spring sweaters, and I just really was more focused for this one, of just the vision of this chartreuse collet pullover. That was what I wanted it to be. That is what it is. In knitting this body, one of the things that I found is that I really like how this pattern is sort of very high payoff in terms of cabling effect for very low relative cabling effort, right? There's a lot of rows in between cable twists. So for most of the time, you're just knitting what is effectively a really wide rib, right? And then just once in a while, you're putting a little twist in the rib. So it's not a ton of work. It's much easier than the Minu cardigan. That was the last cable thing that I knit. This is only one type of cable that you're doing each time also. You don't have to remember different ones. So it's just very sort of low effort, high impact as far as cables go. And I also think that these little purl and eyelet rows are just so cute. I really like the way that that delineates it. Do I like it when I get to a purl row? Not so much, though. When you are knitting flat, when you're doing the back and the two front panels before you join in the round, all those purl rows are actually done from the wrong side, so you're actually just knitting them, which was a really pleasant surprise to me. I still had the body of this on the needles, and actually these are wood needles because because I knew I was going to be working on this on the plane. I've learned the hard way that different countries just define sharp objects differently in their airport security rules. So like flying out of Canada, they do not care about metal knitted needles. It is not an issue. But I learned that, for example, Mexico, which 2 years ago confiscated my metal knitted needles, knitting needles technically fall under the knife category because that is only defined as things that are made of metal and things that are pointy, which yeah. So I tried looking at beforehand what the Peruvian laws around this are, but all that I could find was incredibly sparse. It was just like, don't bring any sharp objects on the plane. And like, what does that even mean? Because like a pen is technically a sharp object and I'm pretty sure I'm allowed those. So I just knew that I wasn't dealing with a level of detail that would allow me to accurately assess whether knitting needles would be okay. So I decided to just play it safe and I picked up a pair of wood needles for this project. I had previously bought a pair of wood needles that I used for a trip last year, but they were a smaller size. Ironically, to knit something of the same gauge, but I think this was before I'd realized that I should just be upsizing my needles. So these were the upsize. Now these are, what are these? I don't like these needles. They are, I don't know, doesn't even have a brand on them. It was something very cheap. What happened was that I left this too late. This was silly because I knew that I wanted to get wood knitting needles for this project. And in my head, what I was going to do was, like the wooden ones that I got last year, I was going to get Luca tips, like interchangeable tips from their driftwood set to match the last ones I got. And because then they will be interchangeable and work with my Luca Cypra metal needles that I'm normally using. And over time, I can just kind of build up a set of those driftwood tips as I accrue travel knitting needles, right? But it just happened that by the time I actually got around to doing this, there was not a way for me to acquire those in time for my trip. They were not in stock anywhere I could possibly go get locally, and anything that could ship them could not ship them fast enough. So I ended up just getting a pair of fixed circulars, and I had heard people talk before about some cords on circulars being better than others, and I honestly didn't know how my Luca Cypher set cords stacked up because I had no point of reference. Now I feel like I can say that those ones are really good because this one's crap. like it's fine. It didn't like interfere with my knitting really. It was just a thing of like, I miss my usual cords. They're nice. I also just miss metal needles because I'm a metal needles person. I don't like the scrapiness of wood needles, the friction, the slowness, I feel like, but I also didn't want to change the needles partway through in case it affected my tension. So even when I started these at home a day or two before, I started on the wood needles, and everything I've done since I got home, I also did on wood needles because I didn't want to mess with it. But I do think that when I start the sleeves, I think I will switch to metal needles because I feel like with the sleeve join, like any slight difference in tension is going to kind of be hidden by that divide being there anyway, you know? And I just would really rather get back to my metal needles. Now, other things particular to knitting while traveling, I almost lost some of my yarn on the plane, which would have been a real problem. And not in a charming way. Like if you follow the author Casey McQuiston or have just seen this, I think it was originally a tweet of theirs, they were on a plane, they were knitting from their ball of yarn. Their ball of yarn fell and rolled down the aisle of the plane, and they had this very like whimsical, cute communal experience where like one by one, people like picked up the ball beside them from the aisle and wound up a little bit and then passed it to the next person ahead of them, and it was this cute thing where everyone giggled and then passed it back to Casey. In my case, I dropped the ball, both literally and metaphorically, when I was trying to add in a new skein. I had run out and was adding a new ball. So the ball was not attached to anything. So I'm sitting there kind of juggling my stuff. I have my like project bag sitting in my lap. I'm trying to find the end of the other ball, because bear in mind there's also a mohair ball. I have my mohair and I have my cotton lino. It's my cotton lino that is making a break for it. I'm trying to juggle all these things, and I feel what feels like a ball falling off of my lap. And I go, oh God, no, did I just drop this ball? And I look down at my feet and I don't see it. But it's also a plane, and so there's sort of like spots like kind of behind your feet that are hard to see. So I'm being very awkward on my seat. I'm basically taking the like brace for impact position they teach you, right? I have to bend like all the way forward, like head to my knees, just to like look at my feet basically. And I don't see it, and I'm like, did it roll further back? Is this like many rows behind me now? Alternatively, did I not drop it at all? Like, I think that I felt something fell, but maybe what I felt was just something shifting in my project bag. Like, I don't see it. Like, it should be here, right? And there is, like, behind your feet, there is a little bar that's, like, a couple inches off the ground on the plane that's basically dividing, like, where your personal item can go up against under the seat in front of you, between that and, like, the people's feet in that seat ahead of you. So there's this little bar that I'm like, well, that should have stopped the ball. But it's also possible it kind of like bounced over it. But maybe nothing fell, because I'm not sure something fell. I didn't see it fall. And I don't actually know for sure how many balls I had in my bag, because the problem was that in the interest of travel, I had split my skeins up into more than one ball each so that I wouldn't have to bring a whole giant skein with me at a time. But on the way home, I had space, the way I had rearranged my luggage and everything on the way back. So I had all the yarn with me, but I didn't know for sure how many balls that was anymore, how many I'd used, how many I'd left at home and decided not to bring. I couldn't remember the inventory. So I'm just sitting here like, do I have a ball of yarn on the loose? Do I not? Where could it be? What's going on? I look around and everyone around me is asleep. So it's not the time to even be asking anybody. But also, it's very embarrassing to have to ask people to look for something that you don't even know exists. So also, this is not a project where I can afford to lose yarn, because as we've discussed in previous episodes, I already think I'm probably going to be playing Yarn Chicken with this, because it was brought to my attention that Sari Nordland pattern estimates often aren't super accurate for yardage, because testers aren't required to finish the whole thing before they're providing their feedback. So it's even more of an estimate than it usually is. And I often need to knit sleeves and body longer anyway, so like I thought that I had a comfortable amount when I bought the yarn, planned this project. But finding out that the pattern estimates are often undershooting, now I'm nervous. I definitely can't afford to lose. Like, if I did lose this ball, it's half of a skein, half of one of my 3 skeins. That's a significant percentage of my yarn that will be gone if I don't have this. And so I'm sitting there like, what happened? And because so if I ask, say, the people behind me, and they can't find it, then what? Like, do I have to like be the person who sits here until everyone gets off this plane so that the flight attendants will let me search the plane for this ball of yarn? Like, are we at that point? Because also, let's bear in mind the sunk cost of all this, like, that I have spent so much more on this project of any other project ever in history. Like, I cannot spend $300 on this sweater to lose a ball of yarn and not be able to finish it. Like, that's just, like, kind of not an option, but also, my God, like, the public humiliation of it all. So, God, what am I going to do about this? And I sort of got to a point where I had, like, talked myself into, like, no, you know what? I don't think it fell. I think that the number in this bag, I think that's probably right. I think I probably have it all. I must have just felt something, like, shifting in the project bag on my lap. It's fine. I don't think I lost anything. A little while later, the like little meal cart comes by, and so people around start waking up. And the people behind me wake up, and I'm like, is this when I have to ask them? Is this when I have to ask them if they can look for my ball of yarn? So I took a deep breath. I shelved all of my shame and my social anxiety, and I was like, hi, excuse me, is there a ball of yarn at your feet? And this is where I realized that in the coin flip of passengers on a flight between Lima and Toronto of are they going to be native Spanish speakers or native English speakers, the people behind me are of course Spanish speakers, because that would be my luck in this situation. And I speak Spanish un poquito. I did like a month of Duolingo to try to pick up some before this trip, and like, you know, got far enough that I could get us through restaurant interactions, so long as they went as expected anyway. But Did I learn enough that I could be like, hi, excuse me, is there a ball of yarn at your feet? I think I may have dropped it. No. So, I try that in English. They speak English a little bit. So we're doing this sort of like language negotiation where like they mostly understand what I'm saying. They understand that I'm asking them if they can see something, but they don't understand what they're looking for. And of course, when you're looking under seats of planes, like, it's not like you're going to see nothing. There's all kinds of stuff. So they can see like charging cords that are like, there's all this stuff. So there's a bit of like a back and forth. I eventually realized like, oh, I have another ball of yarn I can pull out and show them like this, like another one of this. And eventually we conclude like, no, they can't see anything. Like, no worries. Thank you so much for looking. Really appreciate it. Turn back in my seat like mortified because I'm like, oh, I just, if I did the thing, if I had the awkward interaction, I was supposed to be rewarded, right? That would have been really nice of the universe for that to like turn out in the way that I needed it to. And it did not, so I'm so glad I had this super awkward conversation with people sitting behind me. Which reminds me, actually, from within Peru, we were flying between Lima and Cusco because they're quite far apart from each other. And on the flight back, I was sitting next to this Peruvian woman, and I noticed that she was kind of like looking over at me once in a while, and I was kind of feeling like, is she like mad at me about something? Am I doing something annoying? I'm in the middle seat. I'm still not even using the armrest. I'm not in her space. None of my bags are touching her. What am I doing? Like, I'm knitting, but my arms are very much in. They're not all like out here doing stuff. Like, I don't know. Hopefully she's not mad at me, whatever. And then she sort of gets my attention. And what I think I received from this interaction, with my basically zero Spanish and her basically zero English, I think the conversation we had is that she was commenting on my knitting, asking me if I was making a sweater, complimenting it. And then she, from her bag, pulled out a sort of basket weave, either scarf or shawl, which I believe she was telling me that she had knit. I think that's the conversation we had, and it was very sweet and wholesome. So anyway, back to the lost ball of yarn disaster. I again convinced myself they can't see anything from back there. There's no way that it bounced over the bar behind my chair and then also bounced over the one behind them. Like, it should have gotten caught there. I don't think there's any world where this ball is sitting at the back of the plane right now. I did look later when I went to the bathroom just to be sure. I did like take note of that last row. So at this point I was like, it's not on the floor of this plane. It's got to be in my bag. Maybe what I felt was that it fell, but it fell back into the project bag because it was wide open. I have not lost this ball of yarn. And like a couple hours later, I just have one more thought of like, you should really just look one more time. And so I again, like, resume the brace position, like head on my knees basically. And this time I look, I guess, over sideways more than I had before, like in front of the seat next to me. And sure enough, 6 inches from my feet, there it is. There's the ball of yarn on the floor. On the floor of the plane. Absolutely could have left that behind after convincing myself that it wasn't there. And then not had enough yarn to finish the sweater. It would have been so bad. So bad. Like, I think at that point I would have had to just hope that the Wandering Flock brings back Cotton Lino this year, brings it back in the color citrine. Hope that it's also a good color match, or I like finally surrender on this sweater. But to surrender on a $350 sweater, like, I realize I could frog it and make something else that uses that yarn, but again, what is going to use only that amount that I would like as much? Like, it would have been such a debacle. I'd already knit so much of it at this point. I'm very glad I'm not in that debacle. So anyway, I'm pleased to report that I came home from Peru with all of the yarn that I left home with. Even if it was a close call for a couple hours while that ball of yarn was on the floor. But it did make it to Toronto. So like I said, the next steps are to pick up and get the sleeve started. Another part of doing that, instead of just finishing off the body first, is that I, again, don't know exactly what my yardage situation is going to be. So I want to do enough of the sleeves where, like, okay, if I end up having to make them 3/4, that's fine, I can live with that, but I want to get them at least like to that point to know that I have that much yarn before I finish the body, and then I can sort of see, okay, how much wiggle room do I have to extend? Maybe only the sleeves, maybe only the body, maybe both, maybe neither. I don't know. We'll see, but I just would like to see what kind of the status is with that, where we land with that. And again, like I said, see how much the shoulder construction relaxes in blocking. So once I get a little bit of notable length on the sleeve, I will do a mid-project block and see what that tells me about where to go from there. Also, random annoying fun fact of this project is that I have had to wind up my last skein of the mohair and the Cotton Lino by hand because my ball winder has stopped working. Like, the bottom part is spinning, but it's not spinning the top part. And I think all that's happening is that it just needs to be oiled. But do you think that I currently know where that oil is? No. So until I figure that out, I had to ball a very large amount of yardage, that this is only like half of it, by hand, and it took me a very long time. I think half of it took me the entire length of the last episode of Squid Game. So like a solid hour. So that was not my favorite part of working on this sweater, but it is now done and I can now move forward. So there's that. But yeah, so in terms of yardage, I have now used, I believe, 2 of my 3 skeins of cotton lino. So that has gotten us ostensibly the entire body minus the ribbing, but again, minus do I need to make the body longer? Now, the tricky part of this though is that because this cable repeat is so long, there are a few different places that Sari recommends you can chop that pattern repeat depending on the length you want. I think it's either right below this purl row or right above it or right in the middle of the cables are sort of the best places to cut it off. But personally, just looking at photos, I really prefer the way that Sari's ends just below this purl row. So I kind of have a vested interest in mine ending there, which means that either, well, there's yarn like all over me, that's great. Either I have to be okay with this length, however this looks on me, or I have to A, be okay with and have the yarn to knit a whole other cable repeat, which is like multiple inches, right? So that seems kind of unlikely to me that I'll have enough yarn for that. I guess that's TBD, but that's where we need to move ahead with sleeves to kind of figure out where we are with that kind of yardage and go from there. Maybe it's time for me to try this on so we can get a better sense of where we are, which means that I need to move this on to try on tubing. And if I were aka Nora Knits, this is where we would have a really charming little segment where I like chat to you about things while some like cute music plays and there's like a warm tinge over everything. But putting things on tried on tubing is the bane of my existence, and I'm not like a cheery, fun, chatty person while I'm doing that. So BRB. Ta-da! Okay, so it's kind of a funny little vest right now, but this is the general idea. As far as length, we're definitely a little on the crop side right now. It's just sort of touching the waistband of my jeans that are sort of like a low high rise, medium high rise. Obviously with ribbing that adds a little bit more. I think in this case it's 1.75 inches, so to about here, but that's still quite a bit above where I would typically end a sweater. Is this going to be a case where it's going to have to be more cropped sweater? We will see, and that's a possibility that like I would be okay with. I just want to kind of know what my options are once we get further with sleeves. It's also right now looking a little bit more fitted than I imagined that it would be, but I also do think I'm kind of banking on the idea that these cables are going to sort of loosen up quite a bit, because cables do tend to relax and just drape a little bit more nicely after blocking. I really saw this in the Minou cardigan I knit for my sister before and after blocking. So I'm trusting that that's going to happen here, and I think that will give it less of like a tailored and more of a sort of like boxy look like it is in Sari Nordland's pattern photos. So I think that it's looking very promising so far. Like I said, very high sort of bang for your buck in terms of cabling effort. And I mean, I think it'll be better with sleeves. I'm not really here for the vest of it all, but so far so good. Okay, now I also have several acquisitions to share, and not because I've been on like a yarn buying rampage, but just everything has suddenly arrived. So last year I placed an order from Wool & Co, but it was like a special order that they had to order in from the yarn dyers, and it was multiple different dyers, so you had to wait for like multiple custom orders, whatever. Anyway, it is finally here. So the first 2 things I have to show you are from Hedgehog Fibers, and now this is already obviously wound into cakes because I have actually started swatching this for a project that you will hear more about in my spring knitting plans very soon. But I took a picture of what it looked like in Hanks because it was just so pretty that I felt like I needed to show you what it looked like before. So this is their Oh So Fine Merino fingering weight in the colorway Foam, and I believe Down by the River, I think this one is called. So just 1 ball of each, and this is for a sort of nice lightweight spring thing that I have in mind that we'll talk more about soon. But I am very excited about this combo. These 2 balls cost me $73 US in total, or about 105 Canadian. The rest of that Wool & Co order was from La Bien-Aimée, and the reason that one was a special order was for this one. This is the Inko colorway, which is part of the La Bien-Aimée anime collection, which at the time that I was looking for this didn't seem to be very widespread in terms of being available from other stockists. It was really expensive to order direct from La Bien-Aimée. I think now it seems to have been picked up by more shops, so I think it's a little bit easier to get than it was at the time. So this is on the Merino DK base. Then I also got another yarn in the Merino DK base that is the colorway Winter, which is this really nice like off-white. Like you can see it in comparison to its own label, right? It's this nice sort of warm taupey off-white, which makes me feel better. Like I ordered this and I was like, ugh, is it really silly that I ordered like indie dyed white? Like is that really worth the price tag, especially when like indie solids cost the same as indie variegated? So I was like, should I just have gotten a cheaper white? Probably, but at least I knew this way that like the two bases would be the same and they would work together. And particularly because this is going to be my first color work project is what these are for, it's just kind of one less thing to worry about, is like having discrepancies in the exact yarn weight. So I was like, okay, fine. And seeing this, like, am I going to make a habit of ordering the color white from indie dyers? No. But do I feel like there's a nice kind of extra specialness about this particular one, this particular shade, this particular white? Yeah, it makes me feel a little bit better about it. I feel like it's this really nice white that will contrast nicely with the Inco and pair nicely with this yarn, which is the one that I picked up in Vancouver. This is the Shelterwood Fiber Co. 100% Romney wool in the DK base in the colorway dark, not gray, brown. So I mentioned a while ago in my winter knitting plans that I was thinking of knitting up the Serendipity sweater. So that is in fact what I have my eye on these for, and I was having a really hard time coming up with contrast colors that would work well with this. I didn't want to just go all neutral, but I also was finding it hard to pair a fun color with this very warm gray brown color, but I feel like the Inco fits the bill perfectly. I am really excited to see how these knit up, but currently I'm not exactly sure where that sweater fits into my plans because, like, we're running out of winter, right? By the time I finish my Colette in, like, late March, am I gonna want to be starting a stranded color work DK weight wool sweater? Maybe I will. That's not a hypothetical question that actually means no, I won't. I just genuinely don't know. So TBD, will that end up in my spring plans? Will that kind of get shelved until it starts to get cooler again, or at least just far enough in the summer that I'm thinking about when the weather turns again? I'm not sure, but I do know that I have the wool for it now. So these two skeins cost me $77 US, or about $110 Canadian. The 3 skeins of this that I picked up cost me $117.67 Canadian. So that means our whole project cost, as long as I don't end up needing more yarn, knock on wood, is $228 Canadian, or about $159 US. Now, like I said before, did I go to alpaca country and come home without alpaca wool? No, that would be foolish of me. So when we were in Cusco for a few of our days there, we were doing a guided tour, which was supposed to be like a small group tour, but I guess because it was rainy season, no one else was in our group, so it was just like a private tour, which meant that I didn't have to feel at all bad when we went to the alpaca farm and I wanted to spend too much time in the gift shop looking at all the alpaca yarn. Now, I'm also going to pop up some alpaca pictures from this just for fun while we're here. So our tour took us to Manos de la Comunidad, where they were showing, of course, the animals that the fiber comes from, but also how the fibers are treated and dyed. It was super cool. They had some women there working on weavings using some of the yarn, and just like, I just stood there for a few minutes and watched one of these women working on like one row of her tapestry, and just the amount of time that took, I was like, how is anyone ever making a whole tapestry? Like, I realized that maybe other people feel similarly about watching people knit, but like, I just could not fathom how labor intensive this was. So shout out to people who weave. Wild. Also, one of the things that blew my mind about talking about the dyes and stuff was that apparently there's a natural dye that you get from this like weird parasite bug that will cling to like cacti and really just looks like bird poop. If you pluck that off and squish it, the inside is this like vibrant like blueberry purple. And then if you add lime juice to that, it turns orange. Like what? Anyway, so that blew my mind. So in the gift shop, I was surprised there was actually only one weight of yarn available. It was all DK, and I didn't really have a plan to go off of here because I really had no idea what was going to be available. I didn't know what the colors would be, what the weight options would be, and crucially, there was no signal in there. So I had no access to my Ravelry favorites or anything to look up like, okay, based on what's here, what might I want to make? What might I need? So it was sort of a stab in the dark, but based on the colors that were there and based on sort of what I've already knit, what's already in my to knit pile, like there were some nice neutrals there, but I was thinking like, I have this that I'm knitting with soon. Like, how many neutral colors do I want to be using lately? What's a color here that's not already represented in my knit wardrobe, but that I am interested in knitting? And a color that has sort of risen in the ranks of my personal interest lately is this sort of emeraldy, but sort of more yellowy, huntery green. And this rose to my attention also in relation to this trip because for this wedding, I needed a long dress, which I did not own. And just the colors that like formal wear dresses tend to come in, like there tend to be a lot of like jewel tones, right? Or pastels, but those look terrible on me, so I write those off immediately. And the jewel tone that I always feel the best in is a bright like royal blue or like sapphire blue. But because of this, the two dresses that I already own that are like wedding appropriate are that color blue. And I was like, now that I need a long dress, am I just gonna buy a third dress that's that same color blue? Like that just seems silly. And the next best color that I could find was basically this color. And then when it arrived, I really loved that dress more than I expected to. This is not a color that I've ever gravitated toward in a store. It's not a color that in isolation I'm like, ooh, I love that. But I'm learning that I really like it on me. And so I was like, maybe this is the time to knit a green sweater, which also kind of feels like an appropriate souvenir sweater for the trip. Because if I think about Cusco, I think of the mountains, the Andes, which are this color. So I think there was something really nice about a sweater that's this color that is like my Andes sweater, you know? And I think the thing that would feel like the most Peru in a sweater to me is unfortunately not a sweater that I currently like really want to knit, because so much of what really captured my heart in Peru was the amazing like colorful textiles everywhere. There's all of these like pom-pom garlands. Chairs at restaurants will just be wrapped in colorful fibers. Like it's very fiber arts forward in this very colorful palette, and it just feels so like joyful. And I love it so much, and I think that I would love that look, that effect translated into a sweater. But I don't really feel like that's a kind of color work that I currently want to jump into. Like I'm about to tackle my first color work, and I think 3 colors is going to be plenty. Like the way that I would envision that sort of most Peru of colorful fiber art sweater would be very much above that pay grade. And also wasn't one that I really felt that I could plan from within that gift shop, not being able to look up any quantities, any patterns to figure out how many different colors would I need. And I also don't think that they had the right combination of colors there either. Like I think that even if I had the perfect pattern sitting in front of me with all the details, I don't think that I could have pulled together all the materials that I needed for that project there. And I really wanted to just get all the stuff for a project there so that it would be my Peru sweater. So in the absence of being able to do sort of a pom-pom garland in a sweater, my Andes sweater is going to be my plan. And what sweater is that actually going to be remains to be determined, though I am thinking a possible contender for this could be the Ballard pullover from Sari Nordland, which has sort of been floating around my like fall and winter maybes list. So that one is still in the back of my head. And I do allegedly, again, we now know we can't necessarily trust Sari Nordland yardage estimates, but I got a lot of this yarn. So like I said, I had no signal in the store. I was not able to check any yardages. So I was like, how much of this do I need for a sweater? But it came in bags of 10. You could buy fewer than that, but that was how they were like neatly packaged. And I was like, that feels like enough for a sweater. And the sales lady was there and I was like, that's enough for a sweater, right? And she was like, yeah, definitely. So is it more than I need for a sweater? Possibly. But being home and being able to check the yardage on that pattern, I actually think it's not very far off. And again, if her estimates tend to be under, it might be exactly the right amount for a sweater. So that's TBD. But so I got 10 balls of this. This is 100% luxurious baby alpaca, and each ball is 50 grams or 112 meters. Now, fun alpaca facts while we were here. I got to see the difference between a like standard alpaca that most alpaca yarn comes from and the Surrey alpaca. So if you have ever bought Surrey and been like, I don't really understand what this is, it's like sort of silky, sort of mohairy, I don't know what's going on, it's from these guys with the really long silky hair. Fun fact. Also, this baby alpaca, 5 days old. This baby alpaca, 3 days old. This baby alpaca is 1 day old. He's still learning to walk. Look how cute he is. I also learned that baby alpaca, when you're buying that yarn, that's defined as their first shear. So actually, by the time they're sheared for the first time, that's not until they're 2 years old. So it's actually 2-year-old alpaca more than baby alpaca. But the point is, it's their baby fuzz, right? It's their wool that's never been shaved off yet. So everything after that, standard alpaca. And standard alpaca is shaved once a year. So that's like really not a lot of fiber coming off of one creature, right? Like that's a lot of downtime in between. Anyway, so my 10 balls of that cost me $234.41 Canadian or $163 US. So we'll see if that makes its way into a Ballard pullover or something else. It's probably going to wait until the fall or winter season, but it will be there and it will turn into my sweater of the Andes. All right, that's all I've got on the knitting front. So let's get into off the needles, where we talk about non-knitting sort of hobby things, often reading, but I've decided I also want to introduce a new sort of mini segment into this segment because if you hadn't noticed, The world kind of sucks right now. Like there's a lot of really terrible things happening. On this trip, actually, we met this American guy who was kind of part of an adjacent tour thing that momentarily joined up with ours. And he, as soon as he found out we were from Canada, his first response was, I'm sorry. So anyway, I thought that maybe a nice addition would be like a small business shout out. Specifically right now focusing on Canadian small business shout out, because there's a lot of focus right now in Canada on like, okay, we need to shop Canadian. We need to focus internally and support each other as much as we can. So with that in mind, I thought I would shout out the Etsy shop I just bought something for my niece's birthday from, which by the way, if you are my niece or in the household of my niece and she is around, please just skip ahead a couple minutes. She has very, very curly hair that she has to take good care of. And so one of the things that she asked for her birthday was like a satin bonnet to sleep in. And at the Etsy shop that I found this from for her, I also found the most genius thing I've ever heard of, which you might think that's a simple toque. In fact, you could have knit her a toque for your birthday. Why didn't you? It's satin lined, so it won't mess up your hair. Is that not the most brilliant thing you've ever heard of? Like, this stopped me in my tracks, and honestly, I am like, why did I not order one of these for myself? Because I really should have. It's brilliant. So I will drop a link to this Etsy shop down in the description below, because brilliant. Okay, and now on the reading front, I have a couple of book updates for you. So as always, all the books I talk about are going to be linked in the description as both physical books from bookshop.org and also as audiobooks through Libro FM, which is like Amazon, only it's not Amazon and they support independent bookstores, so we like that better. Libro is actually also running a promo right now where if you start a new 1 credit per month membership with Libro using my link in the promo code SWITCH, you will get 2 audiobooks for free, so that's fun. I've also got my link below for Everand, which is basically like the Netflix of audiobooks. Instead of buying them like you do through Amazon or Libro, you just stream what's currently in their library. So the first book I finished recently is called The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. And Caroline O'Donoghue hosts a podcast called Sentimental Garbage that I absolutely love. And I feel like I need to tell you that Caroline O'Donoghue is Irish, so you should be hearing all this in an Irish accent. And after listening to her podcast for quite a while, I was really curious to read some of her fiction. And it was so fascinating to read because there are ways in which I 100% see it and I hear her voice, and it's fun reading a book being able to read it in the author's voice yourself, but also it's fiction, so it's not like it's just going to be her own conversational tone. So it was a fun sort of in between. But the thing that stuck out to me the most about her prose writing is she writes the most like off the wall but precise and hysterical similes I've ever read of anyone, and it is consistent. like throughout the book, there's just so many similes, and they're all absurd and they're all amazing. This is from page 6. I rub at the dome of my stomach, having just recently settled into a period of relative calm in my pregnancy. The rough nausea and perilous uncertainty of the early months had made me feel like I was in the first stages of a long whaling voyage. By month 7, I've reached a kind of plaintive ocean madness. I cannot imagine land. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to be pregnant forever. Just the long whaling voyage just really killed me the first time I read that, and it's just the whole book is just like that. So the premise of The Rachel Incident, this is a adult contemporary fiction, I guess, that's centered around a sort of like new adult age character. She's like, I think at the tail end of college. It starts with her older when she's pregnant, but most of it's sort of like recounting that. But it's not written in a sort of YA new adulty voice, but it's also written in a very readable voice. It's not like a high literary kind of situation, and it's basically about her getting entangled in sort of being the accidental cover-up for her best friend's affair with his professor. It's just very sort of messy, like older adult reflecting on her messy young adult life, and it was just her comparisons are hilarious. I really enjoyed her voice. I just really like Caroline from her podcast, and it was a really good read. I enjoyed it a lot. The other thing I finished recently is For the Love of a Dog by Patricia McConnell, but holding this up is actually kind of misleading because I have had this book sitting on my shelf for years. And I've actually read, another book of, at least one more book of hers, The Other End of the Leash, I think it's called. Phenomenal. She is like a dog behaviorist. She's very knowledgeable on like dog body language, just like understanding like what your dog is trying to convey to you and sort of understanding like when they're doing things that we don't love, where is that coming from? Like it's actually them having a hard time in this specific way or that specific way. And these are the ways that us understanding them better can help both of us live sort of more peacefully together. And this is very much sort of in the same vein. I would say that The Other End of the Leash, I would suggest as like the first one of hers to read, and this feels like a kind of more in-depth companion piece to that, I guess, getting kind of even more into the minutia. But I say it's misleading for me to hold this up because I actually read this one by listening to it through Everand. So I found the streaming model of Everand to be really useful for the books that I already own physical copies of, so I don't really want to buy another digital copy. But if it happens to be in the Everand streaming library, Perfect. So that has allowed me to get through this book that's been sitting forever, because I've just learned that I prefer to sit and read fiction, but I prefer to listen to nonfiction. So I'm really happy to have finally read this one. I did find it interesting and insightful, but again, I would recommend starting with The Other End of the Leash if this interests you. So that's all I've got for you today. I would love to know, sort of in the context of, I picked up fun yarn while I was in Peru, what is your favorite place that you've ever gotten yarn from? I want to know the story of where that yarn came from. So let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for coming to knit with me today. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you're not already. If you already are though, you're my favorite, and I'll see you next time. Bye.